Well, here's the problem that we face in this conversation is while we have access to more content and more wisdom than ever before, we're also more distracted than ever before. We have more things fighting for our attention than we ever had before. And so we just don't have enough time to read what we want to read. And so for a lot of us, this conversation's almost a discouraging conversation that we don't really like to have because we think of the stacks of books we own that we've never read. Like, how many of you have unread books on your bookshelf? I think everybody does. I remember a moment years ago that I'll never forget. I was a youth pastor at a church in Texas, and it was a Wednesday night. Right before youth group, I was meeting with a high school boy. He came into my office, and I think it was the first time that he'd been in my office before, and he kind of looked around, and he saw my bookshelves, and I didn't have a ton of books, but I probably had 2 or 3 bookshelves worth, and that was enough to impress him. It doesn't take much to impress a high school boy, and he started to look at all the titles, and he said, "Have you read all of these books?" And I kind of laughed, and I said, "Well, no, I haven't read all of them. Some of them I bought, and I'll read later." He said, "Huh," and we sat down and we talked, and in the rest of the meeting, I kind of got distracted because I kept looking over at the bookshelf and trying to figure out, I wonder, have I read that book? And once the meeting ended, I raced over to my bookshelf and I just began to count the number of books that I owned that I hadn't actually finished or even read at all. And I realized this sad reality that over half of the books that I owned that were on my bookshelf, I had never read. Over half. And it was kind of embarrassing to me because I thought about how many books I keep buying that I never read. And, maybe you're the same way where, you just don't have the time to do it, right? But imagine if that played out. Imagine if you went to the grocery store and you bought a ton of groceries for your family, and then over half of them, every single week, you never actually ate. And you never even opened, and you just threw them away, right? Imagine if you bought a bunch of clothes and over half of them you never wore. You wouldn't want to do that, right? That's a waste of money, and it's kind of a waste of your time, right? And so we have these tensions in this conversation where we even ask ourselves, am I too busy to even do this? Because we have a lack of time, because we have a lack of energy, because we have a lack of focus, right? I mean, how many times have you said you're going to wake up early and read that book, and you got a few pages in, and then you got distracted because somebody texted you, or because your kid woke up and needed something to eat, or because you looked outside and there was a butterfly, right? Or you're maybe at nighttime, you say, okay, no screens tonight, we're going to read. I just want to hop on Instagram for a minute, and then the next thing you know, it's 4 a.m., right? I think that this is a hard conversation because of that, but what I want to say is this. This strategy works because it takes those things into account. It takes into account the fact that we feel this lack of time, this lack of energy, this lack of focus. In fact, I still think you'll be able to read 100 books in a year using this strategy, because this strategy really only takes about 30 to 60 minutes of your time, 4 to 5 days a week, depending on the book. And so I think there's some hope here. And before we dive into the nuts and bolts of it, I just wanted to give you a few stats on the state of reading in modern day America now, because believe it or not, it's sadder and more depressing than you think. Okay, you ready for this? Here's a few stats I'm going to throw at you. There are over 7 million books available on Amazon right now, and that number continues to grow. Literally by the minute, books are being uploaded on Amazon and Amazon Kindle as we speak. 7 million collections of wisdom, 7 million bits of knowledge from the best experts, and some of them, a lot of them are not experts, but there's knowledge out there that's available. So there's more books. We have access to more books than ever before, and it's easier to get those books than ever before. So surely, with us having that much access to reading, we are reading more than we ever have before. True? Not true. It's the opposite. Americans right now, between 20 and 44 years old, spend less than 10 minutes a day reading. That's the average, by the way. 1 in 4 Americans, 1 in 4 adults, didn't read a single book last year at all. Like there's a good chunk of Americans that don't read at all. And all those numbers actually just continue to decline. 10 years ago, that same group of people, 20 to 44-year-olds, were reading 17 minutes a day. Now it's 10. So even though we have access to more books, to more knowledge than ever before, we're reading less than ever before. The average American last year read 4 books total. Again, that's the average. And so I'm going to be honest, I think for me, it's hard for me to say that I'm loving the Lord my God with all my mind when I'm reading less than 4 books a year or not reading at all. I think we have an opportunity here to grow and to stretch ourselves. And before we begin this strategy, I think what might be helpful is for you to just be honest with yourself and just ask yourself this question. On a scale from 1 to 10, how much right now are you feeding your mind with new ideas, new thoughts, and new insights, new wisdom? 1 to 10. 10 is, I'm doing this better than you, all right? And 1 is, I'm not doing it at all. You're probably somewhere in the middle of those two, I imagine. But what is that? Because the goal is this. We just want to bring that number up through this course. We want you to become more excited, more passionate. We don't want this to be a discouraging conversation. We want this to be something that you really do feel motivated to do, because you do have the time, you do have the energy, and all that's missing is a strategy to help you to get there. So let's begin. I'm going to start by just sharing the shift I began to make that led me to a completely different result in my reading patterns. Okay, so I began this strategy in 2019, and at the time, it was an incredibly busy year in my life. I think it was probably the busiest year I've ever had in my life. I was a young church planter. It was their first year as a church plant, so it was incredibly busy getting to know people and doing a lot of events. My wife and I, we had a toddler and a newborn, which is maybe the hardest season of parenting we have had so far. And I was right in the middle of my doctorate degree too. So I just knew that I had so many things to balance. I had to be more efficient with my time. And reading is something that was important to me because it would give me balance. It would help me to relieve stress. And I wanted to keep growing. And I didn't just want all the books that I read to be about church planting or books I had to read for my doctorate. And so for that season, I ended up creating this strategy that I've now used for several years since then. And just to put some context to it, in 2018, I read 12 books. And I was very proud of that because I was finally starting to read regularly. But then in 2019, by using this strategy, I went from 12 books to 102 books. And forever changed the way that I viewed reading again. I did this again in 2020, and I read over 150 books in 2020 using this strategy. Now, obviously, there was a large chunk of that year where a lot of things were shut down and I had more time on my hands. But I've used this strategy again in 2021, and I'm on track. I'm filming this in 2021. I'm on track to read about 115, 120 books this year. And so if I can find the time, surely you can as well. And my hope is at the end of this course, you're going to say, there's time enough at last. I just had to learn how to view my time differently. It's like that famous Twilight Zone episode, there's time enough at last. I'd show a clip of it, but CBS would probably sue me, so I'm not going to do that. But here's what we're going to do. Here's your first step. I want you to go ahead and pick the first 5 books that you want to read. What are the next 5 books you want to read using this strategy? And then I want you to either jot down the titles or go ahead and make a stack of them somewhere that you've kind of got the motivation ready to go and you know to dive in. And that way, as we're talking through it, you can begin to think and process this for those first books that you're going to read. And let me give some parameters. Because right now we're focused on gaining wisdom and gaining knowledge, I want you to pick nonfiction books, books that are going to really help you to grow, not just fun books. Okay, so start with those. We're going to get to the fun, the fiction books in a little bit, but for now, I want us to focus on personal development. So pick those first 5 books. Don't overthink it. You probably already have 5 in your house that you bought and haven't read, but just go ahead and set them aside and then jump into the next session.